Hello, everyone. Unless you have been living underneath a rock or have been in your own bubble, you're probably aware that the Wicked movie has been released and is officially in theaters. Being a Black woman who grew up in the Southwest and continues to love academia, I really related to this story and I really related to the character Elphaba because she is a person who is different. She stands out based on her skin color, as I did growing up. And much like myself, she throws herself into academia and that's where she thrives. And that is the launching pad for finding her own value and self identity. There will be mild spoilers for the first act of Wicked. I won't go into too much detail, but this is your very soft and light spoiler warning. So, the basic plot of Wicked revolves around Glinda the Good Witch and Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West. It's meant to be a sort of prequel to the beloved story The Wizard of Oz. Glinda and Elphaba meet at Shiz University, where they both study magic. Glinda is very beloved and popular, while Elphaba is an outcast and is widely judged by her green skin. The two of them don't hit it off right away and have a sort of back and forth dynamic, hating each other, but eventually come together and form a unique friendship. Together, they eventually discover more information about the wonders of Oz and meet the wizard. And that is where they discover that the wizard is not all that he has portrayed himself to be. They have very different ideals as to how to address this. Elphaba follows her heart and wants to help the people of Oz, while Glinda kind of steps back and watches Elphaba lean into this villainous role that society has created for her. So, the general metaphor of this movie and the lessons that you walk away with are: don't judge. Sometimes those who are ostracized have a lot to offer, and things aren't always what they seem. As a Black woman watching this movie, I looked at it through the lens of race. It was really difficult not just because of my own personal experience, but because Elphaba, one of the main characters, is quite literally being judged based on the color of her skin. And the more I sat through the movie and the more I was looking at the visuals, the more I kind of saw these parallels between US history and the social climate of Oz. Specifically, I saw how the dynamics in the movie kind of replicated those of the Jim Crow era and mimicked some of the racial discrimination tactics here in America. Now, I know there is an entire subplot in this story that's focused on the animals and the propaganda that circulates about them and the just continuous rights that are lost throughout the movie and how they're treated in the land of Oz. But for the sake of this video, I really want to focus on Elphaba as a character. And another video, maybe I'll talk about how the dynamics of how animals are treated in Oz also paralleled those of racial discrimination in this country, but I wanted to keep it to our main character, Elphaba. Now, the Jim Crow era is a period in American history that lasted roughly from the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s. And this was a time in American history where it was largely believed that white Christians were pure and were seen as the chosen people, while Black people were seen as inferior and imposing upon the good that white people were trying to contribute to society, whether it be politically or socially. There were many forms of legislation and regulations formed against Black people that prevented them from fully integrating in society and took away a lot of their rights. As a main character, Elphaba's discrimination in Oz isn't taken to the full extent. Otherwise, there would be many restrictions on her character and there would be barely any plot. Instead, like many Black people, we see her navigate her environment, being given some opportunities in life, but still feeling the resistance from those around her and being discriminated against. Even though we as audience members can see the harm that is being done by judging Elphaba and her ostracization, in the film, the characters and the students at Shiz University really form camaraderie around this hatred towards her and find a sense of community in collectively making fun of her. Alphaba's presence also really elevates Glinda as the good, pure one amongst all of her peers. One of the ways this parallels the dynamics during the Jim Crow era is during this time, it was widely believed that white Christians were the pure and chosen people, while Black people were seen as inferior and infringing upon white people's ability to create a peaceful social and political climate. And one of the ways white people coped with and channeled their distaste for Black people was by collectively making fun of them. This is where we see a lot of the blackface caricatures of the Jim Crow era, where they reduce them to a stereotype, exaggerated features of them, and came together to see Black people as the enemy. They formed a united front that allowed them to bond over this collective ideology. This is not unlike the villainization that we see of Alphabet in the movie. At the very beginning, we see these banners being flown that have an image that's supposed to resemble her, and that image is very grotesque and mean looking. And one of the things that I think is brilliant about this film is that when we're actually introduced to Alphaba, the real her, she is seen as just so beautiful, at least widely by the audiences. She's played by Cynthia Erivo, and you can see her face is adorned with these freckles. Her micro braids are pulled into a larger braid, and she just looks stunning. And it's such a sharp contrast to the very heightened caricature that we are first introduced to. One of the more grim ways white people formed camaraderie and community during the time of Jim Crow revolved around the death of Black people, and that being a sort of communal point for people to come together and celebrate. And oftentimes, this involved fire. At the beginning of the film, during No One Mourns the Wicked, we see the characters bring out this giant wicker statue that is meant to resemble Elphaba, and they set it on fire. And I remember watching it in the theater and getting slightly sick to my stomach. And at first, I thought that was just because, on a surface level, I identified with Alphaba, I cared about her character, and it was really sad to see them celebrating her death. And while that is still true, I think, again, because I have that connection to the story that has a racial element, I subconsciously was comparing it to the way Black people have been villainized and discriminated against during this country. And sometimes those exact same methods were used as a form of celebration and belittlement. Wicked is just such a powerful and effective story that revolves around how false narratives can be formed and spread and result in such crucial harm. One of my main takeaways from Wicked is just because something seems celebratory and is widely accepted amongst society doesn't mean it's right. And that is something that I think is just so imperative when it comes to the human journey of forming morals and developing a sense of integrity. I just love that Wicked has brought so many people together and so many people are able to enjoy the story despite coming from different backgrounds or having different identities. I love that I'm able to sit down and identify with the story so specifically and recall so many different moments of my lineage and life experience and have that unique connection to the source material, even if that's not what the creators had in mind. And at the end of the first act of the story, the choice that Elphaba is faced with is either to conform to what society wants of her or regain power of the negative and villainous narrative that has been applied to her. And boy, oh boy, is that ever a metaphor for the Black experience in America.